Vous êtes, je t'aime, vous êtes, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer. Vous êtes, je t'aime, vous êtes, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré. Vous êtes, je t'aime, vous êtes, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly talk show where we take a look at the news across the continent and hear what is at stake for you and for Europe in the wider world. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Coming up this week, Ukraine takes one step closer to joining the club after EU leaders agreed to kick off membership talks. Moldova too. Still in limbo though. 50 billion euros of life support for the war-torn country. Georgia also got the nod of approval from Brussels for candidate status. Looking on, Serbia, whose elections last weekend saw incumbent Aleksandar Vučić come out on top. And it's Christmas time, a moment for Christians and non-Christians all across the world to celebrate. But on people's minds this year, the suffering in the Middle East. From the victims of Hamas's horrific attacks to the bombing of the Gaza Strip, we're taking a look at what more a divided Europe could do to bring about a sustainable, long-lasting ceasefire. A warm welcome to our guests this week, Antonio Nestoris, Deputy Executive Director of the European Liberal Forum, Marta Barandi, founder of the Ukrainian civil society group Promote Ukraine, and Philippe Lambert, the Belgian MEP and co-president of the Green Group in the European Parliament. Good to see you all.
A pleasure.
Now, I know it's been a pretty intense week. You didn't get much sleep. There was lots of deals broken on the EU Migration Pact and also on the fiscal rules. But actually, what we want to focus on here is the big surprise of 2023. And that is that EU enlargement is back on the table.
It's a Christmas good news story from Brussels. Membership talks with Kiev can officially commence. EU leaders, except for Hungary's, said the country is ready for talks. Moldova too. And Georgia gets candidacy status. Thousands took to the streets in euphoria, holding the EU flag up high. But beyond the symbolism, the road to Brussels will be long and winding. It could take years. With the full-scale war in Ukraine entering its 22nd month and cash injections for the country in limbo, we ask if Ukrainians will be able to hang in there or if they could lose their morale before.
Well, let's put that question to our Ukrainian around the table. Martha, how are Ukrainians doing? Will they be able to hang in there? As we heard, it's a long road to Brussels.
Oh, we need help. We need more help in terms of weapons from Europe and from the West. I have to say that we are a bit disappointed in terms of comparison. In 1 year, Europe helped us with 300,000 of ammunitions, and comparing to that, South Korea with 330,000 just in 4 months. So, how many countries are Europe? How many countries are South Korea?
Yeah. Is the problem, Philippe Lambert, that Ukraine as well has dropped on the agenda, perhaps here in political minds?
Well, it would seem that there's a sort of fatigue with the so-called European leaders. I see them falling back into their old tracks on many political topics. So you mentioned a few. And I think that they fail to realize the crucial, absolutely existential importance of the war in Ukraine to Europe. The war that Putin is waging in Ukraine is against the European Union. And Ukraine is there alone fighting is for us. And I really feel that there's a lack of perception of that, well, existential importance, frankly.
And of course, President Zelensky popped into that EU summit giving a speech. He was also touring a number of countries here. He was over in the States reminding people of the plight of his country. But this news about the accession talks starting, Antonios, I mean, do you think this is the good news story of the year?
Yes, it is. It is a historic decision. And it's very symbolic of the strong commitment of the EU to support Ukraine. But what I'm worried about, as you said, it's a one step closer. But what I'm worried about is about the next step already. And we have to think about the next step already. Because if we want to draw a historical parallel, we can look at what happened with the Western Balkans, for example. 20 years ago, they were also coming out of devastating conflict. And, there were security considerations underpinning the urgency for the enlargement. But 20 years later, 6 countries remain outside
And
of
also,
the
if
EU.
you look at countries as well, like Bulgaria, Romania, still trying to get into Schengen.
Exactly.
So even when you do become a member of the club, you don't get all the same conditions. Martha, did that give you a bit of relief, that announcement from the summit? Or, I mean, how did you feel?
Our role of civil society is to keep on reminding Europe that we already deserve to be in the Union, not just opening negotiations. Ukrainians are paying for this with their blood since 2014. They are the only nation. They have been dying under European flags, and Ukrainians that have been killed on the occupied territories. When these territories are being deoccupied, we find the European symbols in their homes hidden. So these are the Ukrainians who are ready to fight for European values till we are in the EU, and we will keep on reminding. And I want to highlight what you have said, that some politicians consider the war on Ukraine as a threat. Other politicians or other European countries, I would say, as an attack on Europe. And that's a difference. It triggers different response. Is it a threat or it is an attack?
Exactly.
For Baltic states, for more Eastern European states, it's more an attack. For Western European states, unfortunately, it's only a threat.
It's obviously different where people
And I'm a
are. Very
Westerner.
briefly, Antonius?
Yeah, I hear what Marta is saying, but we have to remember that apart from a political project, European enlargement is also an enormous bureaucratic endeavor. It's a monumental exercise in state transformation. And the candidate countries need support, and we need to take into consideration the particular circumstances, especially if they have been ravaged by a war for 22 months.
Well, look, one woman that was pretty pleased about this announcement from the EU summit was the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katerina Mathernova. She took to X to say the news was historic. And I actually managed to catch her briefly to hear what this announcement meant for the people of Ukraine.
I think the reaction is very much one of elation, I would say, and of a big morale boost. I mean, this is without exaggeration that every Ukrainian cares about this. There is more than 90% approval rating and goal of everyone to join the European Union. People are simply exhausted after almost 2 years of war. It weighs very, very heavily. This was such an important symbolic as well as practical gesture.
Katerina Mathernova there stressing how exhausted people are. And it's worth pointing out that not everyone in this town was happy with that news at that summit. Of course, the Hungarian Prime Minister did not give the green light to those talks kicking off with Ukraine, with your country. He took to Twitter to say that starting negotiations with Ukraine is a bad decision, that Hungary did not participate in that.
Cowards.
He actually left the room. I mean, what message does this send?
There are two messages. First of all, Olaf Scholz deserves admiration because we heard that it was Olaf Scholz who actually made Orban leave the room. So in the beginning, Olaf Scholz was very much criticized for lack of support for Ukraine, but now he played a key role in starting the negotiations process. But as for Orban, it gives a message that actually Putin can buy governments. Putin cannot buy people, but can buy governments with whatever relations there are between Orban and Putin. Since 2014, he borrowed 10 billion euros from Putin. Orban borrowed for a nuclear power plant. Whatever the relations are, it's not up to me to decide. But as in general, we have to say that European Union needs some reformation and needs majority of votes when it comes to the security challenges of European Union and geopolitical process. We have to be adults and take adult decisions.
Well, Viktor Orban's Europe Minister, János Boka, backed up those words, saying the process is not straightforward. It's subject to various political and procedural conditions.
Of course, but I find it quite rich coming from a member state which, if it were a candidate today, would never enter the European Union, to basically posture and say, well, you know, Ukraine is not ready. Hungary once was. Hungary is no longer. I mean, and that is a big problem. We have within the European Union member states which do not fulfill the conditions for being a member state, and we let them get away with that. The reason why Orban is able to blackmail the European Council is that the European Council, and especially the European Council, and the Commission has played a role there, has turned a blind eye on him destroying democracy in his country.
What
We
can
have
they do
allowed
better?
them to blackmail us.
I wouldn't go too far reading into
You
this.
call that too far?
Maybe, yes. If Putin is buying governments, I wouldn't put it that
I didn't
that
say
way.
that.
Well,
I said
Marta said.
Hungary would not enter the European Union today.
And that's an argument that a lot of people say here in Brussels, but unfortunately we don't have a Hungarian around the table to hear their perspective.
So what I would like to say is that, in the end, this is political maneuvering. It's a negotiating tactic. I think that Orbán is going to take his money in the end, and he's going to agree with the financial aid, which is more than just a financial package. It's a lifeline for a nation that is fighting.
Just to remind our viewers, you're referring to the 50 billion Ukraine facility that was blocked by Viktor Orbán.
So would your
summit.
political group advocate releasing the 20 billion EU money that is still being blocked under conditionality and RF conditions? Is that what you are saying?
The Council is going to negotiate that.
But the Commission, Philip Lambert, the Commission has also given the green light to that.
Yeah, exactly.
No. I'm talking about the money that is still blocked, and for which Hungary is not fulfilling the conditions. And I hear from a liberal saying, well, basically, we will release the money and he will agree.
No, I didn't say that, so don't put words in my mouth.
I'm glad that you corrected.
Okay, let's get back to why Ukraine desperately needs that money. Will you tell us what the situation on the ground is and why you desperately need those 50 billions that are blocked here in Brussels due to politics and will be revisited on the 1st or 2nd of February, I believe. EU ministers and EU summit will take place to look at that funding. But just remind us why that money is so
Because we need to boost Ukrainian economy. Ukrainian economy is completely out of order. A lot of refugees, a lot of people left country. There are men who are fighting and who are going to be drafted for war. How is country is going to survive if it has no means? There is nothing going on in terms of economy. Everything is focused on war.
And President Zelensky said that this week in his press conference, his annual press conference, end of year press conference. He reiterated that he didn't know when this war would end, but he needed thousands and thousands of more military to help out.
This war is going to last long.
And that is the tragedy, the fact that we're talking about a humanitarian crisis. We're talking about a financial package that will make the difference between life and death, chaos and stability, hope and despair. And yet the EU is not able to take a decision in that. And we have the Council taken hostage by one member state. In this case, we have to consider that this exposes a more systemic problem with the institutions, and we have to fix that.
And it's not just here, in fact, these debates over money. Look at the United States, where elections, of course, will take place next year. There's big divisions in Congress over that multi-billion aid package to Ukraine. I spoke to the US Deputy Treasury Secretary about this the other day, and he insisted that despite the political noise, the US still had Ukraine's back.
Our view is that we need to do everything we can to support Ukraine, to make sure that the Ukrainian people not only are able to defend their country, but they know that they have a future, one in which they can grow closer to democratic countries. I think there's more than just a small good news story coming out of these last set of meetings. It just further demonstrates that Europe remains committed to the cause of freedom and democracy, and that you're willing to do what it takes to make sure that we support countries like Ukraine. And the thing that we want to make clear is that America plans to be your partner in doing that, and we look forward to deepening that partnership as we go into 2024.
So strong message there. I mean, but a message is one thing and reality and implementation is another, Martha.
Indeed, we are expecting still that our allies realize that the war is going on already on the Western soil, on the European soil, and basically against the Western values. I came here to show you something. You know, we have Christmas market, we have a chalet on the Christmas market here in Brussels, and this sticker of the Wagner Group was found yesterday on our chalet. So the war is here. This is the group that is fighting in Ukraine and fighting in the Middle East, and this is the group that is paid by Russians, by the Russian government.
Are MEPs aware of that, Philippe Lambert?
No, I was totally unaware of that.
We haven't shown this to anyone yet. We found it yesterday evening on our chalet, where we sell our things for a Christmas market. And
but are you worried, Martha, with next year being such a big year of politics, like elections taking place here, elections taking place in the US, that people will start to forget the plight of the Ukrainians?
At the moment, there is majority of Europeans supporting Ukraine. So we have to, like our civil society organization organized a forum where we united all activists from Europe, Ukrainian activists, and our goal is to put Ukraine on the agenda of all European parties like Liberal, Center, Center-Left, Center-Right, so we can ask later the report on how they're going to execute their political programs. So once they have Ukraine on the program, how they're going to execute it. So our goal is to actually keep them responsible for Ukraine.
And what about you? What do you think?
I'm worried. I'm really worried because, we had the president of the Ukrainian parliament in the conference of presidents of the European Parliament not so long ago. And it was a bit not worrying, but how should I say, strange to hear a unanimity of political groups saying we support you, we are with you, etc. When you know that actually around the table you have a number of political families that include parties that either overtly or slightly covertly are still pretty much saying we need peace in Ukraine, that is, we need Ukraine to accept defeat.
Surrender, yes.
But they will not say that openly. And so what I say is that Ukraine has quite a number of false friends in Europe who claim to be together with Ukraine.
Do you agree with that, Antonius? Does Ukraine have false
they
friends
are not.
here? Because obviously in the capital...
Look at Geert Wilders. Look at Marine Le Pen.
That is a real danger. Yes, It is a real danger. And that's why I'm saying that the momentum can lose steam very quickly. That is why we have to make sure that the accession process is more effective and that it doesn't go for 10 years or 20 years and so on. And we have to reconsider and rethink our approach to EU accession, which has been extremely successful in the past. It has transformed the whole continent, basically, Eastern and Southern Europe. But it's not as effective as it used to be. Yeah. We have to think about that.
I agree.
And just like looking forward into the future, if and when Ukraine does eventually become a member, Moldova as well, Georgia, would it be the end then of the kind of Franco-German axis? Would the shift of power move towards maybe around Poland?
Well, how should I say? The aggression that Ukraine started in 2014 and then upgraded in 2022 has somehow exposed the failings of the Franco-German leadership. There's an excellent book by Sylvie Kaufmann of Le Monde that explains very clearly how Germany, France, Italy have been willingly blind to who Vladimir Putin really is. And that, I think, has dealt a massive blow to the moral leadership that France and Germany pretended to exert on the European Union. So, of course, these are the two biggest economies in the European Union, no question about that. But when it comes to geopolitics, they've been proven dead wrong.
And Martha, in Zelensky's address earlier this week, he was calling on Ukrainians to come back home. Obviously, there's around 6 million based here in Europe and probably very integrated at this stage. Do you think that will ever happen, that many will go back home?
I hoped so last year. The longer Ukrainians stay here, the better they are integrated, they make their life here. On the other hand, their men, so usually it's women with children, their men are still on the front line. Their men are still in Ukraine. They cannot leave Ukraine. So, of course, the families are there. So it's the chance they are come back is high. But we have to make sure that we all create the conditions for Ukrainians to come back. And that's why the economy, the boost for the economy is so important, so that they have to come back to somewhere, to a business, to a job.
Indeed, because that will be the challenge as well for Ukraine, because they could be facing labour shortages as well in the next few years with such a gap. We didn't get time to talk about Serbia, but did you keep an eye on those elections last weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it went as expected. In the beginning, there was a lot of optimism from the opposition, and there was movement. They united against Vučić, but in the end, everyone expected the result, and it doesn't give a lot of hope for the future.
But many reports that there was electoral fraud. I saw the German foreign minister warning about that, Joseph Borrell as well, and the Commissioner for Enlargement calling on Serbian authorities to follow up on all credible reports of irregularities.
Well, Vučić is an autocrat. He doesn't even make a mystery about that. And indeed, also the problem is then you have to unite the opposition from the far right to the left, and that, of course, is not very credible as an approach. He has made sure that he would weaken his opposition. And again, that's what we are witnessing in Hungary as well.
Those Serbian elections another time, because I'm afraid we're out of time. Philippe Lambert, we
Already.
have to take a very short break, but do stay with us, because after the short break, we'll be telling you what took some EU staffers out to the streets of the EU quarter last week in anger. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. Now, it's Christmas weekend, which means the EU institutions are shut for a few days and the EU quarter of Brussels pretty empty. But on people's minds all across the city and the continent is the ongoing Israel-Hamas war and the ongoing suffering. Thousands of people took to the streets of Brussels last weekend to call for a sustainable, peaceful solution, and graffiti signs can be seen all across the city calling for a ceasefire. And before going on Christmas vacation, hundreds of EU staffers walked away from their desks to sit outside in the cold, holding signs for a ceasefire now. They've also written letters to their bosses saying that they do not agree with the EU approach to the Israel-Hamas war. Have you seen these pictures of this demo the other day? I mean, I haven't really seen a movement like that in the EU quarter happen for a while. It just shows you how strongly people feel here. Antonios, did you see them?
No, it's the first time I saw them, but it, again, to me, demonstrates that there's a fundamental problem with how decisions are taken or how we find and maintain common positions in the EU.
Because this sends a very confusing message to the wider public. When they hear Brussels says and then they see Brussels staffers going against the decisions that Brussels have said, it gets very confusing. But obviously this is a complicated issue and a complex issue for you.
Well, no one is saying that it's simple. But, when I heard at the beginning of this term Ursula von der Leyen and others saying we need a geopolitical Europe, when there's actually a lack of common geopolitical vision about the 27 member states, that makes it impossible. And that's what we are witnessing, especially in the Middle East, which is the thorniest issue of them all, that indeed there's so widely diverging visions across member states that it's just impossible that Europe speaks with one voice.
And meanwhile, the city, have you seen the graffiti all across the city, the protests last weekend, the EU staffers coming out?
Have seen that, and for us it doesn't make sense to actually separate the issue of what's happening in Middle East from what Putin wants and his interests. He supports Hamas. He was the one giving the information to Iran probably for exchange of the drones. So he was the one accepting officially the delegation of Hamas after the attack. The provocation was a pure provocation from Hamas with very high quality videos, very, very publicly made of the very first day of attack of Hamas on Israel. So it's a provocation that is probably managed from somewhere where everyone is afraid to accept that the war is already going on, and the main goal of Putin is to paralyze the decision-making of the West. Putin has called the West to war, and the West haven't showed up.
If I may, you cannot ignore either the cozy relationship between Netanyahu and Putin, because when I look at what happened when the aggression was raised in February 2022, the reaction of Israel was not really to be on Ukraine's side, right? He was keeping his cozy dialogue. You know, when Macron says we should not humiliate Putin, well, Netanyahu was pretty much on the same line.
Even though the IDF is so sophisticated, it could have helped out more. But just back to what the UN has been saying there, Antonios, that the world cannot turn away to the humanitarian catastrophe over in Gaza. Do you feel that EU foreign ministers could have focused more in this region in the past?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But again, how to find a common position and how to support and maintain that, how to act. The EU is not able to act. And if you think about it, because there were links between Ukraine and Gaza, we have two wars and two humanitarian disasters at our borders, at our doorstep. And the EU is not a relevant enough actor to deal with it. So how can we talk about a geopolitical commission when we cannot even stabilize our own continent, our own neighborhood? It's a matter of credibility and reliability of the EU. We have to deal with it.
We have to deal with it. And there's also that diplomatic spat between three countries, the three strongest critics here in the European Union of Israel. That's Ireland, Spain and Belgium. The ambassadors of those countries were called in for diplomatic scolding. But look, I wanted to get the perspective from a former military representative. So we caught up with the retired Irish Colonel Dirk.
But ceasefires can help the situation. And I'm talking about temporary and localized ceasefires. One of the solutions would be to allow Hamas to leave Gaza under a flag of truce and to go into permanent exile into another country that would take them. It will achieve the Israeli objective to remove the military threat. I'm not talking really about war crimes here, but that's a matter that should be left to the International Criminal Court. That decision to allow Hamas to go would require extraordinary leadership, courageous leadership on the part of both Hamas and, of course, of Israeli government as well.
Proposal there from Dirk. A reaction to that?
Could be a solution, yes.
Is that something that's being discussed?
Well, I don't know. I know that there's a Saudi plan to that extent that has been floated around. Well, you know, when the Israeli government is saying that they want to annihilate Hamas, I'm not sure that this is something that you can really do, actually. And I do believe also that the way the IDF has been going around this, the retaliation to the terrorist attack of Hamas is just seeding the ground for more would-be terrorists. I mean, if you're a kid and you've seen all this, just imagine that you're a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and you are witnessing that. How will you grow up? And with what kind of mindset towards Israel? And make no mistake about that. I mean, Hamas is instrumentalizing the Gaza population, absolutely. But you cannot deny what the Israeli retaliation will be making. And so I'm not sure that Israel is making the solution, a lasting solution, easier. And when you see a government that is populated with nativists, far-rightists, who basically want, in their language, consider Palestinians as subhuman beings, you don't see that the solution is close at hand.
So is it time to say there is no solution? There will never be?
No, you can't say that.
Martha's perspective there?
It's a never-ending evil. It's a weird trap. And the thing is that we have to look in the core of the problem, and that's a provocation that will always be going on from outside. And whatever Israel is doing, I'm international lawyer. I know very much about humanitarian law, about war crimes, and I am on the side of the civil population of Palestine. Of course, we cannot just close eyes to the war crimes. But what solution does Israel have? I am not on the side. I mean, I am not in the position to say.
Look, we're also thinking as well of a lot of Israelis who victims as well of this horrific war.
Absolutely.
And hostage takers that are still there in horrific conditions. Many people not celebrating Christmas because of that horrific situation. But thank you so much to our guests for being with us, and thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here on Euronews and check out euronewsofcourse.com. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show with me, Maeve McMahon. Now, it is Christmas, that time of the year where billions of people celebrate the birth of Christ and or the arrival of Santa Claus. It's a time for frantic shopping sprees, overeating, resting, reading, family time perhaps, if you're lucky enough to have the day off. So I'd like to ask our panellists, what is on your wish list this Christmas for yourself and also for the world, Martha?
I would say that, it's not really for myself, it's for Ukraine, for Europe in general. We have a Christmas chalet. I invite everyone to come to our Christmas chalet in Brussels because it's a charitable sale, and out of this money we are already making a point of resistance in Ukraine and Kyiv. But talking like in general, I wish that every Ukrainian child sees their father to come from the front line, that every Ukrainian family that endured loss from the Russian war gets justice, and that every Russian gets the sense of regret.
Okay, just a lot of our viewers are across the world. They won't be able to visit that market, but I do encourage you all to come to Brussels if you ever have an occasion, and of course some time to visit those markets that I actually visited the other day, because I wanted to ask people as well here in the city what they were hoping both for themselves and also for Europe and the world.
déjà un cessez-le-feu serait pas...
A ceasefire would be a good thing, and that people can get together with their families and celebrate Christmas.
What would be the best is for us, like as citizens, to put our differences aside, try to embrace those differences we have.
I want the peace in the world.
An end to the war in Ukraine and Israel. I hope for circumstances to improve and the return of the welfare state.
Le meilleur.
The best, no war and lower cost of living.
That it will be better than the year before.
Peace in Palestine, Israel, all that stuff, all the wars, let's just get along,
Definitely peace, especially in Ukraine.
I think less poverty for the world.
Peace, that's the only thing, the basic thing yet a hard thing to achieve. Peace in the world.
So very clear wishes there from everyone I spoke to. Everyone wants peace, and nobody had any material wishes actually that I spoke to.
That tells you that people care about what is really important. You can't have prosperity without peace. That's a basic condition. And I'm afraid, and if I could wish for one thing, is for European leaders to act as leaders and open their eyes on the reality we're in. And I'm afraid I don't see a lot of that at the moment.
Okay, if they're watching, hopefully they've heard that message loud and clear.
Well, and if I may add...
Just wait, let's get Antonio's.
Yeah, same here. Of course, peace. But my wish would be for the EU to be able to contribute to keeping peace and stability in the continent more next year.
Martha?
Sustainable peace. It's not just peace. Because peace in all, for whatever price, no. But sustainable peace, it's like how do you get that?
And poverty, Philippe Lambert.
Well,
95.3 million people living in poverty here in Europe, according to the Eurobarometer.
And the decision that the EU finance ministers took on the fiscal rules will make them many more, paving the way for national populists to raise two governments. They are already there in many member states, and what those finance ministers are doing is just accelerating the process. This is utter irresponsibility and dereliction of duty.
With all this bad news, Antonius, is it time to cancel Christmas?
No. Well, what do we have left?
What do we have left? I mean, has anyone got any Christmas cheer around here?
Well, we have the luck, and again, what is happening in Ukraine reminds us how lucky we are to live in peace, to get out on the street without being threatened to receive a drone attack. I mean, we should cherish this, right?
Let's cherish those peaceful skies this Christmas that we have and hope that soon Ukraine will also be in peace. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. But thank you so much, Martha, Antonios and Philippe Lambert, for being with us. And thank you so much for joining us as always. Thanks for tuning in. If you would like to get in touch, you can always drop us a line to brusselsmylove@euronews.com. But for now, Merry Christmas. Enjoy the long weekend if you can. And see you soon again here on Euronews.